the show! Woo! Woo! Come on! Come on, come on! Woo! I love the Nuka-Cola sticker. That's awesome.
Look at this team.
Here we are!
Oh, that's okay.
Everybody, coming closer! Join us!
All right.
Oh, climb up that hill.
It's a climb, isn't it? Yeah. Hi. Look at all this. Oh, I love this. Veterans for Peace. Still coming. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Artist for Peace. Love that.
That's the artist,
Very nice.
So we're going to get this started. First off, we're going to have a song by Still on the Hill.
All right, thank you, Abel. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is beautiful. This is great. You know, we're going to play a song that Donna wrote quite a few years ago about the escalation of warfare in our culture. Here, this is called "Up the Ante." And Donna's going to play the snare drum for the first time. Well, back in prehistoric days, folks were simple, lived in caves, fought with sticks and stones and staves, and then they made the spear. But the spear was only good up close, and soon they learned to make a bow, an arrow that could kill their foe from a distance. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. They laid the bow and arrow down when black powder came to town. Now the best weapon around was called the matchlock handgun. With the handguns they were rather crude, and mankind being ever shrewd, wasn't long for it turned into a Winchester rifle. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more, more. And then in 1885, Maxim's guns sprang to life. He could fire many rounds, bring 100 soldiers down. But gunfire and hand grenades made way for submarines and planes. And in World War II, the armored tanks rolled through, and up the ante, up the score, up the ante, cries war, up the ante, more. atom bomb. Got to see the bloody dawn when we drop that weapon on the folks of Hiroshima. Today we've got a bomb that's smart. We've turned the act of war to art. Unmanned drones can hit their mark from far across the ocean. And then there's weapons up in space that can end the whole human race. And if that's how it is, nobody wins. It's up the ante, up the score, up the ante. Fires more, up the ante, more, more. And up the ante, up the score, up the ante. Fires more, up the ante, more, more, more. More, more, more. Now here we go now. Luckily, because of Hank Kaminsky over there, we have this great piece of work in Fayetteville that reminds us that peace is a possibility. And this is very simple. This is a chant we wrote inside there, and it just has the words, "May peace prevail on earth." And this is how it goes, and y'all can jump in there. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. No. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. Give it a try. Here we go. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. One last time. May peace prevail on earth, on earth. Thank y'all. Peace. Thank you.
Next, we have Solomon Birchfield of the Poor People's Campaign. He's a tri-state chair. Maybe he can explain more of that, what that means to you. Or tri-chair. I guess there's 3 chairs of the Poor People's Campaign of Arkansas. Give it up for Solomon Birchfield.
Can everybody hear me? The rain is waiting on us. War makes us poor. War makes us poor. My name is Solomon Birchfield. I'm a tri-chair of one of 3 chairs with the Arkansas Poor People's Campaign. A national call for moral revival. The Poor People's Campaign is launching a movement in the spring of this year to unite people impacted by poverty with clergy and activists. We will engage in coordinated, nonviolent, moral direct action in the capital cities of 32 states, including here in Arkansas. We helped sponsor today's parade, and we're joining with you to stand against an immoral war economy. Because when our nation's military budget is larger than the next 7 largest countries' military budgets combined, we have a moral problem in America. Dr. Martin Luther King's original Poor People's Campaign was launched in 1968. It was silenced when he was assassinated that same year. 50 years later, this year, we are relaunching the Poor People's Campaign to reinvigorate that work and complete Dr. King's vision. The work in front of us is to unite the efforts of people who are working for peace, fighting for economic justice, fighting for racial equity, fighting for
Earth justice.
Ecological sustainability. Uniting these efforts into one movement that can recenter American political life. So let me connect the dots between the Poor People's Campaign and the war economy. In the 50 years since the original Poor People's Campaign, the number of Americans who live in poverty has grown from 25 million to now more than 40 million Americans. While the richest 1% share of the economy has doubled, income and wages have stagnated, leaving more than 100 million Americans as either poor or low income. In the same 50-year period, the United States military budget has ballooned. At the height of the Vietnam War, our annual military budget was $350 billion. Today, that same budget is $700 billion a year. War makes us poor. And we feel that here in Arkansas. In our state, 1 out of 5, almost 1 out of 5 Arkansans lives in poverty. 27% of children live in poverty. Did you know that there are 11,000 homeless students in the school system here in Arkansas? Did you know that our health outcomes are ranked 48th in the country? Our education system is ranked 41st in the country. As a poor state, we need investment. And yet, where does all the money go? War. The last time we had a general in the White House, General Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican president, he implored America to reduce our military budget.
Right.
A Republican president. He said every gun that is manufactured robs food from hungry children. Every rocket that is launched robs a home from homeless people. Every warship that is built robs a student of a school and a patient of a hospital. Yet, the Watson Institute at Brown University studied that since the year 2001 up until today, the last 17 years, we have spent on the Iraq War, the Syrian War, the Afghanistan War, the Pakistan War, more than $5.5 trillion on warships and guns and rockets. A fraction of that money could have provided health care for all Americans. A fraction of that money could have provided a housing voucher for every low-income American. A fraction of that could have provided tuition-free public higher education for all Americans. But every time we ask for funding to build our community at home, they say, we've got no money. We say we need to fund health care for all Americans, and they say we can't afford it. We say we need to fund programs that will redress the systemic racial injustice in our society, and they say we're out of money. We say American workers deserve livable wages, and they say we're broke. We're not broke. There's a difference between being broke and being robbed. America's bank account has been robbed. The budget has been militarized. The war machine and the profiteers of war have been fed, while programs that promote the general welfare have been starved. That's the truth about America today. So we need to change things. And we can't change things by winning one political battle. We can't make big changes just by removing one gangrenous administration. To unseat one politician, it only takes anger. But to repair a broken system, it takes a movement for love and justice. The Poor People's Campaign is a movement to unite these issues. The fight for a peace economy, the fight for clean energy, the fight for livable wages, the fight against racist mass incarceration, the fight for universal health care is the same fight. The Poor People's Campaign is planning nonviolent, moral direct action in Little Rock for 40 days, starting on May the 14th. Along with 32 other states, we will have a unified political message to our political leaders to end violent, wasteful war spending abroad and build a peace and justice economy here at home. And we need each one of you. If you're here today, we ask you and invite you to sign up. We have sheets in the back under the tent with the water. You can find the Arkansas Poor People's Campaign on Facebook. We are going to have trainings and education events. We invite you to join us. We need you. Your neighbors need you. So let's connect this parade for peace to a campaign for justice. Let's demilitarize our budget and humanize our politics. Let's transform the war economy into a peace economy. And if we must fight, let us fight for poultry plant workers and for farm workers and for factory workers if we must fight. And if we must march, let us march against white supremacists and ethnic religious nationalists that tear our culture apart. And if we must wage war, let us wage war on poverty, not the poor. Join us, unite the poor.
That was awesome. Give it up for Solomon. And join the Poor People's Campaign. I certainly am. I'm a huge supporter. Next up, we have another member of the Poor People's Campaign, also an Air Force veteran. And I'm really happy that we have members of Veterans for Peace here. Give it up for Michael Martin.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. My name is Michael Martin. I'm an Air Force veteran. And I'm an organizer with the Poor People's Campaign. And as a former member of the service, I just want to say that I have great love and respect for our men and women in uniform. But I don't support those who needlessly and recklessly put these brave men and women in harm's way. I think we need to change the narrative in this country. I want to talk today about imperialism and patriotism, or versus patriotism, rather. In Eisenhower's farewell speech in 1961, he warned, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex." And was he right? Since 9/11, we have spent $5 trillion on wars. We have over 800 military bases in 70 different countries. This is a war economy that serves the military-industrial complex. It's built for imperialism and profit. Again, quoting Eisenhower, and I'm sorry I have to repeat what someone... Every gun that is made, every warship that is launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, the theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and who are not clothed. This is an imperialistic war economy. So what about patriotism? Thomas Jefferson said dissent is the highest form of patriotism. Yeah. These imperialists wave their flags and thump their chests, chanting USA with blind consent. This is not patriotism, this is jingoism. They're saying that your security is at risk, asking for another redistribution of wealth that benefits the 1% and destroys entire nations. It's not patriotism. A patriot speaks the truth to power and says we won't tolerate morality that says it's okay for the wealthiest 1% to own 40% of the nation's wealth.
No.
Nor will we tolerate regime change and forcing so-called democracy on other nations. Dissent for peace. Imperialists say America is exceptional. And a patriot would say we can believe we are exceptional without insisting that we are superior. Dissent for humility. Hemingway said there's nothing noble to being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. And imperialists will say the wealth shall trickle down. And a patriot says it never has. Dissent for equality. An imperialist would wave his flag and say, if you don't like it, leave. But a patriot would say, there's nothing more American than free speech and the right to dissent. Dissent brought an end to slavery, gave us a Civil Rights Act, women's rights, LGBT rights, and labor rights. Dissent. A patriot insists that all men are created equal. Some imperialists might really believe it depends on your gender or the color of your skin. Dissent, we're better than this. An imperialist says America is the land of the free. But a patriot says, how can that be? When we account for 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. We can do better than this. Dissent. An imperialist says tax loopholes are great for business. A patriot says tax loopholes are taking food from those who are hungry and clothes from those who are cold.
It's corporate welfare.
Unacceptable. An imperialist would say we have to cut entitlements. A patriot says we need to look at cuts in the military spending. Imperialism is at the root of America's spiritual and moral crisis. It's up to us, we the people, to stand up and call for an end to these cultural and economic philosophies of aggression and greed, and move toward philosophies based on peace and equality. It is immoral to spend $150 billion a year for military bases on foreign soil, imposing our will on other nations. This is money that can actually be used to ensure free health care for all Americans and a world-class education system for our children. It's time to stand up to systemic racism and call for a war on poverty in a peace economy that serves all the people, that builds bridges and not walls, an economy that invests in all people and not just a few. I am an American, I'm a veteran, I'm a patriot, and I believe in dissent. and taking direct action to fight imperialism. No change will come without dissent. Thank you.
Give it up for Michael Martin. Give it up. That was awesome, Michael. Thank you. Next up, we have DeAndre Jones. He's a community organizer, civil rights and social justice activist, president of NWA Democratic Black Caucus, director of Black Lives Matter Fayetteville, and chairman of Fayetteville Civil Rights Commission, and much more. Please give it up for DeAndre Jones.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Solomon I think Solomon somehow, some way, we ended up kind of sharing some of the same things. And so I think Solomon did a much better job than I ever would have done expressing those thoughts. So thank you so very much. And thank you to all of you for coming out today. Abel, thank you so much for reaching out to me, having faith in me, and asking me to do what I love to do. Ladies and gentlemen, as I think about peace, I cannot help but think about Dr. King. December 24th, 1967, at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Dr. King echoed the following statement on a cold Sunday evening before a filled-to-capacity church. If we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become group rather than sectional. Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. This means we must develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone, no nation can live alone, and as long as we try, the more we're going to have war in this world. Now, the judgment of God is upon us, and we must either learn to live together as brothers, or we're going to perish together as fools. Ladies and gentlemen, if we desire to experience peace, we must realize that unity is essential. Unity is not only about agreeing, being on the same page, and having the same beliefs. As one common definition puts it, unity is the state of being united or joined as whole. If we desire to experience compassion, peace, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we must understand and fully embrace the significance of unity on the road to peace. How do we maintain unity? In order to achieve peace, I'm glad you asked. We must fully understand that Black Lives Matter, no human is illegal, love is love, women's rights are human rights, we must build bridges and not walls, and immigrants make America great. We must stand together in the name of cultural resistance and public witness. Most importantly, we must become more aware, focused, and attentive on keeping the spotlight on the most complex issues which impact the marginalized. Thank you, Poor People's Campaign. Events like today reflect hope. They reflect an understanding of Dr. King's teachings and ministry. Today's event reflects concern and the need to create awareness, empathy, compassion, and change. We can't stop. We won't stop. In conclusion, we must address issues such as systemic oppression and racism hands-on without fear. Dr. King's ministry in life was not only about education on race and discrimination, it was largely due to eradicating and dismantling a system in our country where these ideas have absolutely no power. We must organize, remain vigilant and consistent in telling those politicians, those schoolyard bullies who protect these ideologies to go to hell and take their foolishness with them. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, this is not a game. I'm tired of being bullied. I know you're tired of being bullied. And we're desperate for peace. We're desperate for change. We must continue to speak louder, become more organized, work around petty differences, get tougher, and use unity as our greatest weapon. And then and only then will we experience the gift of peace. God bless you, and remember, we're stronger together.
Give it up for DeAndre Jones. That's awesome. All right, here's our final speaker. And this is going to be hard because I've got now 4 pieces of paper that were once one. And it's right in the middle. And this is our last speaker is Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov from the University of Tulsa. He's the author of the books The Myth of the Addicted Army, Vietnam and the Modern War on Drugs, and Modernizing Repression, Police Training, and Nation Building in the American Century. I believe he specializes in the militarization of our police and police brutality. Please give it up for Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov.
Well, thanks so much. It's a great group of people that I'm following up here. And yeah, it's a wonderful occasion to be speaking, a very important time for a peace rally. As already has been pointed out, in February, the Republican-controlled Congress passed and President Trump signed new budget legislation increasing U.S. military spending by $165 billion over the next 2 years, putting the military budget, probably well over $1 trillion, has been pointed out. Actually, a Gallup poll, there was a poll conducted 2 days after this measure, and it found that only 33% of the American public favored increased military spending. So I think we're not in the minority at all here in what people are saying. These are views and values felt by a huge number of Americans. And I think the point is imperative that we have to organize now all those millions of Americans who feel the same way that we do. And I think it also shows that, we can say now we are ruled by an oligarchy whose policies have nothing to do with the interests and values of the majority of Americans. The numbers of, just this poll of only 30% supporting that military escalation reflect what Noam Chomsky, the great dissident scholar, said was a democracy deficit in our country. And that's, I think, what we're seeing today. And we need a reinvigoration of that democracy. And I think it's starting here with groups like this today. It's a great honor to be speaking before you, because you've organized this, and I think from here, you're going to do great things. During the campaign, Mr. Trump gave some illusions that he was an isolationist in the election, but we know Trump is a con man. In fact, he gave a speech. The person introducing him was Zalmay Khalilzad, who is the neoconservative ambassador to Afghanistan. So how could he be calling for isolationism and have an arch neocon introducing you? It doesn't make any sense. In 2017, his administration eclipsed already, just 1 year, his administration eclipsed the record of 26,000 tons of bombs that the Obama administration dropped in 2016. And that is an unacceptable number. But Trump has gone even further. He tripled bombing in Afghanistan, America's longest war to no end, 17 years. What have we got? We've got the Taliban, who are stronger. And what's Trump doing? Dropping more bombs. And in fact, he dropped the mother of all bombs, just to show that we're tough or something. The largest non-nuclear weapon in the U.S. arsenal on an Islamic State cave complex. Actually, Islamic State was never in. The U.S. UN military presence has created the rise of the Islamic State in Afghanistan. It was never there before, just like ISIS never existed before the foolish invasion of Iraq in 2003. More bombing, so the Trump levels have gone up from already astronomical bombing levels. Inevitably, this has resulted in more civilian casualties. And there was a study of this by Air Wars, which sadly found an increase in 2017 in civilian casualties. U.S. planes dropped, according to the study, 20,000 bombs on Raqqa and Syria. By the end of the 5-month campaign, 80% of the city was declared uninhabitable by the United Nations, and 1,800 civilians are thought to have been killed. Air wars estimated 1,400 of those deaths were caused by coalition air and artillery bombardment. And it seems, again, just like the Taliban are stronger in Afghanistan, Assad seems stronger. What is the purpose of all this bombing if Assad is getting stronger and can use it to rally under the claim that he's being under attack by imperialists? So it doesn't serve any proactive ends, and it kills a lot of civilians. And it's drawn the Russians into Syria. It's turned an internal civil war into a world war that's accentuated the humanitarian catastrophe in that country. The New York Times reported that the United States currently has military troops, and I was astounded to read this, in an estimated 170 countries. Most of us couldn't name it, myself included, probably couldn't name 170 countries. At this time, the United States also maintains nearly 800 military bases overseas in more than 70 territories and countries abroad, from giant little Americas to small radar facilities. As I said, the sun never set on the British Empire. It never sets on the American Empire. And I was in Africa, and there were secret military facilities there in the country I was visiting, Zambia. It's everywhere you go, there's American military facilities. In that case, it was because the Chinese, there's mineral wealth, and it borders on Congo, and it's all about accessing the mineral wealth. The Trump administration, has, it's been a terrible year and a half. He expanded the war in Afghanistan. He's cut the State Department. He's now appointed the head of the CIA to run the State Department. He's escalated arms supplies to some of the most vile dictatorships on the planet. This includes Philippines under Rodrigo Duterte, who's been massacring people who use drugs. And Trump seems to have a great affinity for Duterte, and I think wants to do the same here at home, because Trump called for the death to heroin traffickers at one point here in the United States. These are the kind of regimes that he's supporting brazenly. I mean, in the past, the United States has supported dictatorships, but usually not so much in the open. But Trump has no compunction. It's a complete erosion of the values of the country. Another terrible regime, we talk about the huge military budget and arms sales. Our tax dollars are going, and our money is going to these horrible regimes, including the Saudi regime, which Obama already heavily subsidized, but Trump's upped the ante even more. Saudi Arabia is the leading sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East. We claim to be fighting war on terror, but we're supporting a leading sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East, the Saudis, who are bent on exporting their Wahhabist faith. And American weapons have been used, including fighter jets and cluster bombs, to wage a devastating war on Yemen, already one of the poorest countries in the world, creating a biblical humanitarian catastrophe that should outrage every Christian and every person what's going on in Yemen. Amidst the Russiagate hysteria, our media culture has been so corrupt. There's been this fixation with Russia. It's led to a new Russophobia, and it's driving a new arms race with the Russians. And it's resulted in an increase in arms sales to Ukraine. The Ukrainian government of Petro Poroshenko, which has received over $1 billion in arms sales, that regime is another corrupt regime that came to power in a coup d'etat in 2014 that has about a 5% popularity rating in its own country, and that is waging a violent war, another war America is complicit in eastern Ukraine, where there's been a lot of atrocities committed by the Ukrainian military and paramilitary forces. So more of our money is going into another dirty war, and that's ignited. Putin has responded. It's creating a new nuclear arms race. Putin has tried to stand up to the United States, and now we're back in a new Cold War. And the prospects of nuclear confrontation with Russia has grown greater in this toxic environment where Russia is blamed for everything. The media is filled with articles every day of accusations of Russia. Half of them, there's no evidence at all, including the election, where we know our elections have been corrupted by big money in politics, not the Russians. The Russians may have tried to do something. But the real problem in our country is big money corrupting our democracy, not the Russians. And the Democrats sabotaged the candidacy of America's most popular politician, who most of us here probably supported, Bernie Sanders. I was supporting him. As this new Cold War heats up, Trump has initiated plans not only to expand nuclear weapons capabilities, but also make the devices eminently easier for military forces to use. Even a conservative outlet like the Business Insider warned that Trump was providing a blueprint for nuclear war. A Counterpunch columnist, Paul Street, I like the term, he called him the orange-haired beast. He said, he was all, and this was mentioned earlier, Trump was interested in establishing a space force. He fashioned himself as Ronald Reagan with the Star Wars. If you remember, that was a waste of billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars to try and create this sophisticated missile defense shield. Now Trump's interested in creating, like his hero, a space force to protect American military interests, and has begun investing in a new fleet of GPS and space-based military satellites, less vulnerable to hacking by the Russians and Chinese, who have allegedly demonstrated the ability to shoot down U.S.-based satellites. So, I mean, the Poor People's Campaign, these are the kind of wasteful expenditures we've got to rein in, and as was pointed out, this money has to be spent in our communities. At the end of February, the Trump administration a multipolar world order. The threat of proxy war becomes all the more real because of our arrogant assumption, building off the last speech, that we own the world. Asia is not ours to own. China has been an influential power there for centuries before. It's natural in many ways what they're doing. It's our attempt to dominate that creates a new China threat, the threat of proxy war. There's also the threat of war with North Korea. These playground-type barbs between Trump and the dear leader, Kim Jong-un. Luckily, perhaps there's been a reversal in the last 2 weeks, and maybe there'll be some dialogue, which would be good. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago, calling for empathy towards North Koreans. They've suffered under war, political division and dictatorship, and the threat of renewed war for many, many years. The United States bombed North Korea. What we forget is that we bombed them virtually back to the Stone Age during the First Korean War. And this has shaped the mentality of the regime ever since. A lot of their actions are rather irrational if we think historically. And I think it's imperative, to show some empathy for the North Korean people who have suffered. And we have to send a message: we want peace, not another Korean war. The First Korean War was horrible in many ways, and I could speak at length about that because I did a study on it. But there were, it was a Vietnam-like war before Vietnam. We don't want that again. Another war we don't want anymore is a drug war. We've had the drug war for 50 years, and it's gotten us nothing. In fact, it's led to mass incarceration in this country. It's often been a subtle way to justify arming oppressive governments, and the military aid is used to repress political opponents of those regimes, or opponents of multinational corporations seeking to exploit the resources in Mexico and Latin America, and it's enabled the arming of repressive state security forces. And it's done a huge amount of harm to black people and others in this country. So we need to end that war. Malcolm X said that, chickens come home to roost. And that's what we're seeing as the United States is coming apart as a consequence of this excessive militarization that we've been discussing and the pursuit of overseas empire. We face budget deficits, massive budget cuts, with our hard-earned tax money wasted on reckless military gambits, funding corrupt regimes, and funding this overseas empire, which generates much blowback and greater instability and insecurity for the world. Our society is now riven by school shootings and massacres that are a product of a gun culture which emanates from our excessive militarization and has roots, as Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz has shown, in a settler colonial mentality. We have to work to overcome this mentality. Mentally ill people are able to obtain military rifles and shoot up schools. Our police are also overly militarized and no longer employ a community policing approach, but treat drug users and black people often as enemy combatants. This is all a ramification of our huge military spending and the culture of imperialism. Our economy of death, a historian named Richard Barnett wrote a good book some years back called The Economy of Death. It's stifled, it's horrible to invest so much resources, so much creativity and technological genius into death machines instead of life machines. It's also stifled growth in the manufacturing sector. It's been very bad for our economy as a whole, as excessive military spending has taken productive investment away from our civilian economy and civilian manufacturing. Some of you may be familiar with the writings of the late Seymour Millman, He wrote about this for years. I would recommend his work. In a 2010 essay published just before his death, a theme that was already spoken about, the essay was called How the Pentagon Robs the People. And Melman pointed to deficiencies in the American transportation system, high levels of hunger, infant mortality, and substandard living conditions as a consequence of the military-industrial complex. He also said that gross inefficiency resulted from the fact that managers in state-subsidized firms with cost-plus contracts are under no pressure to minimize their costs because new funds are made available each year with congressional allocations to the Pentagon. It's not a competitive economy at all. It's an economy of cronyism, and it leads to gross inefficiency. In 1984, a pulley puller for the F-16 fighter, essentially a steel belt 2 inches in length with 3 screws tapped in, was sold to the Pentagon by General Dynamics for $8,000 apiece. Melman said if the same equipment were custom ordered in a private shop, it would cost $25. In the early 60s, F-11s cost 3.25 times the initial estimate. These are just some examples he gives of the gross inefficiency of that war economy. Melman laments not only the depletion of America's manufacturing base, but also the erosion of democratic standards owing to the institutionalized power lust of the Pentagon, which came to represent a state within a state. And to quote him, never before in the American experience has there been such a combination of economic and political decision power in the same hands. The consequence of the establishment of a new state management system has been the installation within American society of an institutional feature of a totalitarian system. We need a movement, as has been pointed out in this country today, that is not just anti-Trump, but more broadly a movement for peace and justice, for a more humane economy, for democracy, and a transformation of our political economy. The people here today, you will be the ones, and I think the people here today will be the ones to lead the Renaissance. And that Renaissance will begin in our communities here and in the nation at large. Let me end by quoting James Madison. We've quoted Eisenhower, Martin Luther King, so I'll go back and quote James Madison, who in 1795 warned. He said, of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it compromises and develops the germs of every other. In war, too, the discretionary power of the executive is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. And I say amen to that, and I think, and so does everybody here. So we need to end the wars, abolish the warfare state, and echo what has already been said, invest our money in human needs, jobs, education, the environment, infrastructure projects. We need high-speed rail. America has fallen way behind. We need a rail in Arkansas and Oklahoma, where I live. These are constructive projects that would help the environment. So that's where we have to be spending our money, community welfare, and not more wars and corrupt regimes abroad. So thank you.
Give it up for Jeremy Kuzma. We're almost done. We have one more song. Please stick around. Jacqueline Livesay is going to sing John Lennon's Imagine. And now, please give it up and welcome Jacqueline Livesay, who's going to sing Imagine.
Hey, everybody. Hey, if all you guys know this song, I invite you all to sing along, please.
We're gonna change some words, okay? Jory just invented the best words for this, because in the last verse it used to say, I wonder if you can, no need for greed and hunger and the brotherhood of man. But Jory changed it to, I wonder if you could, no need for greed and hunger, sister and brotherhood.
I'm gonna try. the only one. Someday you'll join us, and the world will be as
Everybody, maybe we can do one quick chant before we leave. We're going to say, what do we want? Peace. When do we want it? Now. Okay, ready? What do we want? Peace. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Peace. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Peace. When do we want it? Now. Thank you, beautiful people.
We got troubles in the world, and to tell you the truth, we've been losing. All the obstacles before us loom like dark and endless forests, so we opt to take the easy way, let ourselves be led astray, and help to turn production gears that swirl and spin around us, as if doomed to do the work of those whose narrow vision brought this fate upon us. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over. 'Cause the ones who would do evil are so few and far between, they will not matter. They'll be swallowed into brightness by a sea of joyous masses, forced to stand aside and join us with no enemy among us, when all nations' work is one and the rescue has begun of our endangered planet. Our survival does demand it, and we'll listen, because it doesn't have to be that way. We'll just wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over and over and over. My friend, is still blowing in the wind, more like a storm. Yeah, it's true, the task is dawning. So much suffering, so much wanting, so much damage has been done by the dollar and the gun. But in the task that looms before us lies the answer we are searching for. It's in the work of mankind, and there's plenty of that work for us to do. Yeah, we can have our cake and eat it too. Yeah, it's true, mankind must work, but that work can have a purpose. We can set upon the dawning task of fixing what is broken. We'll rewire the world with power grids that don't destroy the earth, bring an end to war and hunger, and pay workers what they're worth. And the awesome power of doing good will be loosed upon the world, touching every man and woman, touching every boy and girl. And there won't be need for songs that paint the failure of mankind, 'cause a new song will be ringing in the freedom of our mind. 'Cause it doesn't have to be that way. We'll just wave a wand and move beyond the ancient endless cycle that has proved a dismal failure over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Because it doesn't have to be this way. No, it doesn't have to be this way.